Hello, this is Jamie Magrich. Welcome to Jamie's Craft Table. Today I'm going to show you how I made this card. So let's get started. I'm going to be using Night of Navy, Pacific Point, and Bermuda Bay ink. Okay. This is a quarter sheet of Whisper White to stamp on. I have or an eighth of a sheet. This piece is 3 inches by 5.5, and this is the remaining piece that was cut off of a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch piece. Then I have a scrap of Night of Navy, which is also 5.5 inches. I have a 1/2 inch by 5.5 inch strip of Bermuda Bay. I have a 5.5 by 4 1/4 inch piece of Night of Navy, and my card base, which is thick white, which is 5.5 by 8.5, scored and folded at 4 1/4. I'm going to be using this embossing folder. And that's one of the embossing folders from the Wintery 3D embossing folder set. I'll be using Artistically inked. I'm using this hello out of there, and I'm using this stamp here. Out of Mountain Air, I'm using the 2 trees and the dies that match it, the Majestic mountain dies, and I'm also using the basic borders dies. So I'm using this border die and the dies to cut out the images and the clouds. You know, I didn't stamp the clouds. I maybe could have. I just chose to die cut it out. Okay, so let's set this aside for a minute. And on my Night of Navy card front, I'm going to run it through this embossing folder. I do want to make sure that I have snowflakes on this edge, so I did move it over a little bit like that. Oops, it's upside down. I want the Stampin' Up logo on the top. So I just moved it over a little bit so that I was sure that I was going to have, like, I wanted this big snowflake. So I ran it like that and ran it through the embossing folder. Okay, or through the machine. Alright, now let me bring in this piece. This is a scrap piece, or it's the 1/8 of a quarter sheet of cardstock. And I'm going to bring in my trees and the Night of Navy ink. And I've mounted them on the same block just to make it easier to stamp. So I'm only stamping once instead of a couple times. Make sure I get it well inked. I'm going to stamp this. Perfect. Okay. Now I'm going to bring in those dies, line those up there, and they just barely fit, but it does. And then I need 3 of the clouds. Okay, so I'm going to, well, let's put that aside too for now. We'll do all the cutting at one time. Okay, now I'm going to bring in the strip that's left, and that is 1 1/4 inches, and then my navy piece, which is a little bit wider, and we're going to bring in this die here, and I'm going to just die cut once out of the blue and once out of the white, and they're going to layer together. And this doesn't need to be quite as big. It could be maybe a 1/8 of an inch, so I might be able to trim it, but let's cut the white one first, and then we'll cut the blue one to match it. Okay, and I will be right back. I'm going to go and do that, all the cutting, and I will be right back. Okay, now I've got this piece cut, so I'm going to go ahead and lay this down on here so it lines up. You could always just trim it off the bottom too. And then I'm going to go ahead and line this one up and run it through. Tape that down and run it through. Okay, I've got all my pieces cut out. I did want to show you how I got all those pieces cut out of that 1/8 inch or 1/8 of a piece of cardstock. Okay, put these aside for a minute. Well, these didn't quite line up correctly because I moved it a little bit, but we're gonna slide it over like this and glue those together. So there's just a little bit of a blue border above the white edge. Figure out where you want it. That looks pretty good. It's okay if it's a little bit, you know, hanging off the ends, because we only need 4 1/4 inches of the slope. And this one's a little bit shorter than the one I made, but I think it'll still work. Okay, now I'm going to stamp this piece. We're going to start with this stamp here, and we're going to start with the Night of Navy. Ink it all up. At the top of the page, we want it to be this way to start. We're going to stamp it, and then we're going to move it down and stamp it again without re-inking. Okay. Then we're going to clean our stamp. So we're going to go into another ink color. I'm going to go into Pacific Point. This time I'm going to turn the stamp over. Do it this way. Overlap that one above it a little bit. Stamp. Move down and stamp again. Again, wash the stamp off. My stamp was wet. You can see how it blurred it a little bit. You've got to make sure your stamp is dry before you move on. Or that ink pad's quite wet. Okay. Now we're going into Bermuda Bay. I'm going to do the same thing. This time we're going to turn it the other way. The very bottom of it's fine if it doesn't have any color on it. Okay, now on the edge of this, on the right edge, we're going to adhere this Bermuda Bay piece. So I'm just going to put a little bit of glue. It's a very fine line of glue right there along that edge. Tip it over. Line it up. And tack it down. Okay. Now I'm going to put dimensionals on the back of this. Use 6 of them, 1 in each corner and 2 in the middle. And this is going to get mounted to our Night of Navy card front. And I'm going to leave about an eighth of an inch, quarter of an inch over here on this side. Just want to line up the top and the bottom. Should be the same. Okay, now we're going to take this piece, we're going to figure out where we want it on here, because we want to stamp our sentiment. And we want to stamp it before we put it on here, so we want it about in this area here. So let's set this down here like this, so we know where we want it. And we need the Night of Navy ink. Where'd I put it? And the hello. Go ahead and stamp that. Oh, I got a little halo there. Oh, well, let's bring in my, that probably won't erase because it's a dark color. But bring in our mono sand eraser and see if we can erase it. If not, we'll make the best of it. I rock the stamp a little bit. And I come in with the other end. Smooth it out a little bit. The other end's just a regular eraser, but that worked pretty well. When it softens up that where it roughs up the paper. Okay. Alright. Now, this is going to go on the bottom here. So we're going to put regular wet glue here and a dimensional here. So dimensional about there. Wet glue here. We're going to line it up where we want it with the bottom of that card. You need to stand it up and make sure it's lined up. Okay, now we're going to turn it over. And these aren't my snips, but these will work. Oh, I forgot to take the back off that dimensional. Wondered why isn't it sticking? There we go. And we're going to butt the scissors up to the back of the card. We're going to trim that off on both sides. Okay. And this can go on the, let's wait. Now we're going to glue this tree down flat onto here. We want it to come right over to the edge here. This other tree is going to get dimensionals. And I have a half a dimensional to go up here on the top. Just because it was that's what I was using, the regular dimensionals. You could use one of the small dimensionals, would work just fine too. One at the bottom. And this one, oh, look, I stuck it in the ink. Well, that's going to go right there. I'm going to restamp that. I'll just set it there for now. How to get it in the ink? I don't know. Well, let me restamp it then real fast. Bring in a scrap paper. Is this one big enough? Yes. It's gonna bug me. something on there. I got something on it. Try it again. Okay. Now I'll go cut that out and then I'll be back. Okay, I'm back. I've got that cut out, and since this tree's already on there, I'm just going to glue this one right over the top of that one. Just gonna do this. Alright, that works. Alright, now for our clouds. Put one here, flat like that. Let's go ahead and do it. You could use snowflakes here instead of clouds if you'd like. This cloud is going to hang off this side over here. And this one is going to get dimensionals on it, just on this one side. It does fit there, but the baby one would work much better. Take that back off, wet glue on the rest of it. Overlap this one a little bit. There we go. Now I'm going to turn this over. I'm going to trim off this one that's hanging off. I'm going to bring in my wink of Stella, and on the top curves of these clouds, I'm going to just do a swoop of this wink of Stella just to add a little bit of something else just on the top edges. I don't know if you can see that or not. Then I'm going to go right along the top edge of this snow here. Okay, now we can glue this to the front of our card. Should be the same size as the front of the card. There we go. There's a card we just made together. Here's the one we did previously. Well, thank you so much for joining me today at Jamie's Craft Table. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I hope you can find a little bit of time to play with some stamps, ink, and paper.